Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Parisi podcast. I am super excited to be joined by the first reoccurring guest on the Parisi podcast. You probably heard this. Yes, that's how you're being introduced. The reoccurring guest. I believe this was guest number 2 or 3. I think you were right after
one with
Eric
Steve
Cressy.
Leo.
Yes, you were right after Eric Cressy, I believe. So maybe you were number 3. We are joined by Katalin, and I'm going to butcher your last name, Katalin. So I'll let you say it. But Katalin
Rodriguez-Ogren.
Rodriguez-Ogren.
Yep.
Boom. Core. And she's the owner of our Parisi in Chicago. And I'm going to let Katalin do a much better job introducing her than I just did. Katalin, take it away.
So I own a facility in the West Loop in Chicago, which is basically kind of in part of our downtown area. So it's 6 blocks from the Sears Tower. It's called the Willis Tower now. I still call it the Sears Tower. So we have a facility that is 8,500 square feet. I've been in this neighborhood for over 20 years. And I added the Parisi Speed School to my business about 6 years ago, but actually started to prepare for that development and advancement in my career about 8 years ago. So it was the best thing I ever did, and I could not be happier. But my original business model was a mixed martial arts training and fitness center. I was actually the first boutique gym to open up in the city of Chicago back in 2000. And my original vision as a career martial artist was to provide an opportunity for people to train in a multitude of martial arts under one roof and fitness without judgment. Because in previous decades, like all the way through the maybe mid-90s, it started to change. It was not really normal for a martial artist to study more than one style. Then there was the whole idea that fitness and strength training and cross training was not really well received by the martial arts community. A lot of it being lack of education in that community, as well as kind of a closed-minded perspective on what could make you a better martial artist. And I actually made my transition into integrating the two early in the 90s because I had sold an article to a magazine called Cross Training for Martial Arts. And it was published in a magazine called Inside Kung Fu. And then that part of my career started to kind of expand. And before I knew it, I was writing all sorts of cross training, athletic training articles for all the martial arts magazines. And then finally kind of came to this aha moment where I was like, you know what? I want to open up a facility that kind of houses all these things I believe in and do. And that is what the original POW gym was. So we had, what I would consider kind of functional strength training. Most of it was actually, if you read Bill's book now, the fascia stuff, it was a lot of the fascia. So basically adding resistance tubing to martial arts based movements. Plus, you add things like squats, lunges, step-ups were kind of our bread and butter at the time because those are pretty easy things that you can add into a class environment without having a lot of equipment. And when we opened, we had Kung Fu, we had Taekwondo, we had kickboxing, Muay Thai, boxing, MMA, Jiu-Jitsu, Krav Maga, and then a whole fitness track. And that was like all at one school. And the whole idea was that you could train in any combination of any of them that you wanted. So I looked at it like learning multiple instruments or training in multiple dance modalities. So that's where I started. And then over time, I knew I wanted more of the performance. And like a lot of people did tons of self-education through conferences. And maybe about 12 years in to my business, crossed the paths of Bill Parisi and at a conference. Can't remember if it was Perform Better. I don't really remember which one. And then they had a booth at Ursa. It was like, all right, I'm ready. And that was kind of like the moment I knew I was going to change my business model a little bit. And I was actually looking to get really out of the MMA and fighting space. I was just not enjoying it anymore. So that's kind of my start. And now I'm here with a combat sports and performance training center and a Parisi Speed School all under the same roof.
You definitely did a better introduction than I did. I butchered your last name, and you came in and just basically was like, boom, here's what,
okay.
I didn't even know, I've known you for a couple of years now, but I didn't know that element of POW and like the historical element of POW. And I think that's really cool. And I'm kind of surprised that early martial arts was like, you specialized. Like I feel like that's just doesn't seem like it just seems like in martial arts and in the disciplines of martial arts, it's encouraged to be very well-rounded in a multitude of skills. That's
not at all.
That's not the case.
Not at all.
Wow.
No. So, traditional martial arts has not traditionally been open-minded. Traditional martial arts has traditionally been very narrow-minded. It's very they're over loyalists. You know,
and has that changed with the rise of MMA?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think, your background and what you just shared there is going to be really good for today's topic. So cool. Kat and I are going to be talking about pitfalls today. And for those listening, you're going to get two very different perspectives because Katalin, as you just heard, gym owner, facility owner, operator for 20 plus years now, in a variety of different ways. And I think, when I look at facilities, as someone who doesn't own a facility, I think it's probably easier to open a facility than it is to keep a facility running, let alone into at least 2, 3, 4, 5 plus. And anytime you've done something for multiple decades, whether it's in a profession, as an operator, an owner of that profession, whatever it might be, anytime you can say decades, I think you bring a very unique perspective. So I'm really excited that Kat was able to
thank you
pod today. Because I'm not going to bring that insight. Kat is, and I might have just a different realm. I come from a commercial personal training background, so big box gym, not nationally owned chain. Like Parisi is a national license, but the gym that I was a part of was locally owned, but it still was a big box with 5 locations throughout northern Vermont. So a little different element. So I think our pitfalls may be different, but what I really hope that the listener can get from this is how we overcame them and just strategies to overcome. Obviously, like if you can be aware of someone else's mistakes, someone else's outcomes, that's huge. But I think it's the strategies that we share that helped us maybe come to realization or right the ship, so to speak. I think that is, going to be the big nuggets for people listening to this pod. Kat, do you want me to start, or would you like to?
Yeah, go. No, okay. Go ahead.
So, I have a few pitfalls because I never know how many people are going to bring, and I think this one is pretty general and it's pretty practical. So I'm going to start with kind of maybe a lame pitfall, but it's something that. Once I realized its impact, it definitely was one of those things where I was like, man, I wish I'd done this earlier. And that was to talk to an accountant earlier in my career. As someone who was a W-2 employee, but also had 1099 opportunities and had aspirations of growing my own personal brand, I guess you could say, my own personal, business, side hustle, turned real hustle, whatever, right? I always thought I could do it on my own. I have a business background. I took classes in accounting, all of the things like that. But what I wish I had done, and I didn't do this until I bought a house, was talk to an accountant. Because then I had that first conversation with my accountant. He looked at my previous year's tax returns. And he goes, are you okay if I refile this? And I was like, yeah, I guess. And he actually saved me quite a bit of money through refiling. And in that moment, I realized that the first 5 years of my career, I probably lost more money in taxes and just bad taxes. And I don't even say like I lost money. I probably spent more money or didn't get as much money back in taxes as I could have. And I was like, wow, I really wish I had done this like within the first year. Like I get a job, I reach out to a tax accountant and say, hey, what should I be doing? How should I set this up? But that is pitfall number one, not talking to a tax accountant or a CPA, whatever. My guy is actually called an EA. He's an enrolled agent, which means he can file for me and he can represent me in court, but he is not a true blue licensed CPA.
Accountant. So I'm going to actually jump on that. So about a week ago, I had the honor of being a presenter for the University of Illinois kinesiology course, I don't know, 3 something for seniors on experimental learning and basically working in the workforce of kinesiology and fitness. So I was a presenter for the day on, the truth about getting a job, what you should expect, and all this other kind of stuff. And I was harsh, man.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
It can be a cruel world.
Yeah. So one of the things, though, that they wanted were, what would you do all over again, or better if you could go back in time? And my number one was take accounting in college, because all of the people in this particular course were people with aspirations of opening up their own business, whether it's their own physical therapy clinic, their own gym, it doesn't matter. They all want to eventually work for themselves. So accounting is the biggest thing. So piggybacking on that as an owner now, because sometimes it's just really hard to just say, I'm going to go back to school and take accounting classes, is I wish I would have found the right payroll/accounting firm earlier in my gym's life span. I only added a payroll service 4 years ago. I used to process payroll all by myself for all those years.
Oof.
And yeah. And not to mention, it's not something I'm good at.
Yeah.
Which is why I wish I would have taken accounting. So if you are an owner, or you have kind of a directorship over a facility and your owner's not involved, you have to find a payroll service that knows how to support your business. And what I mean by that is, while there's a ton of payroll services out there, you want a payroll service that helps you with kind of just smaller things that are valuable when it comes to looking at profitability. For example, in my payroll service, I'm able to code out the various types of payroll. So payouts for team training, payouts for birthday parties, payouts, and I can segment that and then compare it to total revenue generated in that area. So for those Parisi Speed Schools who do team training and pay out a team training rate, fee, percentage, if you ran a report in your system on team training revenue for the year or the quarter, it's nice to know what percentage of that revenue went to payroll. So now you can start looking at when it's time to increase prices. And if you're doing, are you giving raises at the right time? Are you giving too many demos away for free? So that's one criteria that I think is very helpful to know if you're going to go with a payroll service. And it has changed my business drastically. So that was a pitfall in that I just wasn't really good at it. And it took me a really, really long time to add it. And now in crisis, I think everyone can agree. I know very few people who would disagree with me that at some point over the last 18 months, we've been in some state of crisis. Hopefully it hasn't lasted for 18 months. You have pitfalls, right? You have ups and downs. Having that type of support system helps you with now all these different programs that are out there. So whether it is grants, whether it's loans, whether it's tax refunds that are available, it's just absolutely impossible to know all that by yourself. So without the accountant and then the payroll service people, the accountant, you pay so much money for them to produce the reports that the payroll services already create. So most payroll services already have a formula in their system to produce a report, for example, for PPP. Whereas I have friends that their accountants are doing all the accounting math, but they're paying an hourly rate for that. whereas payroll services are already creating these reports for their small business clients. So that's something that I feel, had I continued to manage the accounting portion the way I was for the first 15 years, I don't think I would be open right now, because it's all these programs that have actually helped me figure out how to stay open.
And it's funny, that's, I alluded to, like, it's one thing to open a gym, it's another thing to keep it in business. And the management of money is so important, but it's not necessarily what anyone in this industry gets into business for, right? Like, I think people get into business, one, they want to work for themselves. Two, they just, and this is a separate thing, even though it sounds very similar, they don't want to work where they're currently working. And three, and I feel like this is probably the simple iteration of it, but it can be different, is they have something unique to offer, right? Like, and it's trying to get to that point of having something unique to offer, but managing cash, it seems so simple, but yes, it is so important. But you said one thing in there, Kat, and I think I wanted to bring it back to the surface, because it's not necessarily a pitfall that I came about, because it's, as a personal trainer in a commercial setting, it's not necessarily something that I have to really worry about, because I can be pretty one-track minded. You mentioned that, and I forget the exact way you said it, but you said, like a skill that you weren't good at, right? Like it was just like payroll and accounting. It was a skill that you weren't good at. And I wish that for myself, and it's something that I am way more in tune with now as I get further in my careers. If I'm not good at it, I am so quick to find something or someone or a software automation or something that can do that skill better than me. And I feel like a lot of people, and I am going to generalize here, which isn't necessarily the right thing to do, but for a lot of people, it's coming to realization that, hey, I'm not good at this. I don't want to be good at this. So I should find someone who is good at this that can complement my abilities. And I feel like that's just something that I wanted to highlight, because it is so true, whether it's payroll accounting, or if you're a business person trying to train, maybe that's not it. Or if it's a trainer trying to run the day-to-day operations of your business and that's not it, trying to offload those skills to someone who it is something they're good at, is so valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that counting is one of those broad stroke things that you can pretty much say to almost anyone, that even if it is your forte, once you get onto a point of the operation or the development of your business, you really have to kind of hand that piece off. Short of, you've got people who are business owners and their spouse is an accountant or a CPA, you know what I mean? But for the most part, this is a piece of the puzzle that really is too time consuming to bog yourself down with. And it's probably something you should be outsourcing in some way, shape, or form at some point within the ownership or operation of the business, even if you are good at it. It's not a good use of time. That's my opinion on it. And it's really hard to be good at it moving forward. So like you have a business degree and everything, but like, are you really, let's just say you had some accounting and you were really good at it early on. The tax laws and all the programs out there
always changing
and more.
Yep.
So unless you're staying up on that, even if you're good at it, there's no way how to maneuver, not only laterally, but forward with accounting as it applies to your business, because you're not up on all the different programs. So that's the same thing. Like our industry, we're a very scientifically based, research-based driven system as far as how we make big blaring changes, even in our curriculum. I'd much rather be focused on that and staying up on that, because it applies to my favorite part of the job, which is the training and the program directing and things like that, than worry about like, now what are they saying about PPP?
Right.
I don't want to read any more about it. I don't want to read, I'd rather just pay somebody else to tell me what to do.
Right. Kat, I have another pitfall, but I'm wondering if you have a pitfall you'd like to share.
Pitfall is not the right word.
Okay.
Challenges.
Sure.
I do think that motherhood and owning a business is really challenging.
Yes. I'll let you finish actually, then I'll say my thing.
And it's a really, really crappy thing to think about. But if you're a very active mother, it's very hard to see your business grow at the same time. And I found that as hard as I tried, if I could go back in time, I wish I would tell myself in 2007, 08, that work a little less hard on your business because you're not going to grow anyway. Now, I'm not saying all women are going to face this obstacle, but I found that when I went through a business program, I actually applied to a business program, which I did overlapping, kind of discovering Parisi. And then in the business program is where I realized I wanted more. And then I bought the Parisi. They made you do this exercise, which was like taking a knife and stabbing it in my heart. It was so unbelievably emotional for me. They took these big sheets of paper, like you would on an easel, and we put them on the windows because it was in downtown Chicago. A lot of our colleges are in high rises, so you can see through the paper. Okay. And we took our graph of our gross receipts over time and business, and you had to draw it on the paper, right? And then everybody had it on the paper that was in this program. So you could see like growth, nothing, a little down, a little up, a little down, a little down. And then you took a life event based on the same years in business, and you had to graph your life event. And every single birth of a kid, my receipts in my business, and I never saw it from this perspective, had like decreased significantly. And then you had to rate like how you felt about your business, and then you layered that on top of it. And it was just really, it was rough, man. I remember I went home and I cried that, you know, here's this horrible thing that like I should have never been running my business while having babies. And I think really what it was is I should have changed my expectations or changed my support system or done something different. Because it wasn't that I wasn't showing up for work. I was showing up for work, but I was just so unsuccessful in growing my business. So it was like in this really prime 4 years that the industry was just profitable. The fitness industry was growing. The economy was great. I wasn't able to take advantage of that because, you know, I just, even though I worked, it just, you know, it just wasn't a success for me. So that's something that was a very big obstacle in that I didn't really, where I thought I had prepared myself for children while working and teaching, I really should have done more restructuring, despite the fact that I felt like I had a support system. So that's something that I definitely felt was a pitfall. I didn't know it was a pitfall until I went through this business program, but it was a major eye opener for me.
I distinctly remember when my daughter was born, going back to work after a couple weeks and managing a business, like managing a couple departments in a big gym, and not even having like the financial like skin in the game, right? I was just like a mid-level manager, and talking to a couple of our trainers that were moms, and I'm like, how do you do this? Like, how are you doing this? Because it is, and I as a father, like I'm not feeding the kid, like I'm not, you know, I just don't have the same parental responsibilities with the baby. And I just was so blown away. And it was just one of those where I have so much credit, give so much credit and so much appreciation. And it's amazing how moms get it done, right? Like it's this whole idea of like mom strong and like moms have superpowers. Like when you really look at what goes into, and anyone listening to this pod, like if you're probably shaking your head being like, hell yeah, Casey, like it's impressive. And like,
Yeah.
if you don't have kids or you don't, you're someone, you're having kids in the future or whatever, like it changes everything. And the holding pattern is very real. Like when you have a kid, or any big life event, I would think, kids being the only big life event I've encountered, like bunker down for 6 to 12 months and just go into a strong holding pattern and just get it done and go on from there. And like you're saying, the expectations are very real and tempering them is very important.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, it's like, I'm not saying other women haven't done better. I'm sure there are women out there that have done great with it. And I think the difference is I got the list done. So whatever was on the list, I got it done, but my business didn't grow. It shrunk almost, it was just a period of time where there were just tons of Band-Aids. And I wish I would have better understood that going into that phase of my life, that because, when you're pregnant, at least you have a lot of time to kind of plan, for things. And I wasn't planning for how or who or the strategy to keep the business growing, even if it was a small amount of growth over time. Whereas I was like, oh, I'll get it all in. And I did. I got it in. It's like check, 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 check. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're growing your business. So that's something that I would definitely do completely different if I went back in time.
Yeah, indeed. It's that's a good, I like the challenge and then the hindsight, how you can plan different. That's a good nugget there for definitely women listening to this podcast, expecting parents listening to this part of the podcast, like absolutely something to take into consideration and maybe re-listen to that last 10-ish minutes of conversation there. Another one that I've got, Kat, and this is, I think, something that plagues everyone at various points. I'm not saying like when I was younger, I still to this day am plagued by this, but I have a better realization of it. And it's how to maybe not aggregate, but how to apply new education and what to do with it, right? Because early on in my career, it's like, okay, you get certified as a trainer. It's like, what's the next thing? And now I find myself, I'm like, okay, do I want another thing? And I'm like, well, yes, it's good perspective and it's good to, learn about different systems and operations and training methodologies and everything. And then it's like, okay, now what do I do with this information? What do I do with this education, this newfound experience, this newfound education? But specifically the challenge that I'm talking about, referring to early on in my career, it's like, okay, you learned something. Now, what do I do with it? And it's one of those that I wish on no one, but it does happen specifically in our industry where people become certification happy, or they think more certifications will equal more opportunity or more money, or maybe that's the case. Oftentimes I find that it's probably not the case, but this idea of what do I do with this education and how do I apply it is definitely a challenge or pitfall that I found early in my career, where I was doing a lot of certifications and I had no idea what to do with them afterwards. And what I ended up really learning was it's important to have mentors and it's important to have peers and colleagues that you can trust, like that you basically can trust to tell you if you're being an idiot or not. Right. Like, or if you're going too far one way, or they have the cojones, so to speak, to question what your actions are, mentors will give it to you straight, but not always will your peers and colleagues give it to you straight. People who are on maybe like the same trajectory as you or same career path. But that's something that it helped me overcome, the feelings of like, what do I do when I could ask because it was someone who had been there, or if it's someone that I trust, being like, should I really be doing this? Like, is this even worth me applying or learning or something like that? And without naming names of certain certifications and systems that are not Parisi related, it was huge for me.
So I think that that's a really valid acknowledgement. I mean, I actually haven't heard somebody bring this point up in all the roundtables and things that I've ever participated in. I would say a couple things. You have to have a long game in mind and not a short game. So when you make that transition into a career, even if you're not sure it's your 30-year career, but it's your 10-year career, this is what you want to do, you have to have the short game in mind. I do think there's a tremendous amount of value in getting additional certifications, but if you're not in a place to absorb the information of that certification, it's probably time to pause on this. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. They're not necessarily in like a priority order. Long game is really important. There's going to always be times in our life where we're given an opportunity to get like training and certification, but we may not be ready for absorbing it. You should still take it, knowing that one day you might go back and take it again when you're more in a place to absorb and be a sponge. I was really, really fortunate that because I presented on the conference scene in fitness, IDEA, ECA, the Sarah City Manias, every time something new came out, they needed people in these certifications. I was there in the first BOSU certification, the first kettlebell certification, Liebert bar certification, TRX certification. I'm talking like at IDEA World. And they would basically ask a bunch of the presenters, hey, we've got spots in this. And I always volunteered to be in it. That doesn't mean I implemented everything at the same time. I used it as a way to kind of do my R&D. And then when I was ready to kind of apply it, I was always willing to go and kind of redo that layer of certification. So I had the long game in mind, but like, like for a long time, I played with the Raptor, but I never bought the Raptor. I had a vert board. I went through the Raptor. I did the advanced speed training with Parisi in Arizona 5 years ago or something, knowing I wanted the Raptor. I did the whole day training, but I knew I wasn't ready for it. And then when I got my Raptor, I actually, even though I've been working then on the Raptor and vert boards for a while, I went through the Vertimax certification earlier this year, because it helped me to pull it all together. So that's one thing that sometimes it's just, you have to wait for it to come around. If you're part of the Parisi network, to answer this question, you are absolutely in a great position because of the number of mentors you have. You have to have people who you can go to. And you have to find and put the time in to find the individuals that you feel you click with, so that you can learn from them, but not necessarily all at once, but in small doses. And that's back to that long game. So while you want it all sometimes at one time, you have to be willing to donate your time for free to learn from others, even though you think that, you should be paid to teach that class. Let's say you're accomplished as a trainer, and now all of a sudden you want to move into teaching the elite strength program, but you've never really applied it yet. You have to go spend time under somebody that teaches it really well for free, in my opinion, and be mentored by that person. In theory, you should learn way faster than somebody that's never even done strength training before, so that you understand how to apply something that you know to a whole new modality and application of training. That's the one thing I've definitely found young people are not willing to do right now. They come out with a communist degree. They've been a personal trainer for X amount of years, and they just think, they might look at our program and it's an elite program of strength, and they just think like they got it because they read deadlifts. They don't get all the in between. And there is a slightly different way in which we run a strength training class, because it's got a different perspective in mind versus strength training for a fitness goal, strength training for a performance goal. It doesn't matter that the movements we use are the same movements. We all know that it's all about the way in which you sequence movements that make programs different, So that's what I would say about education, adding certifications, play the long game, be willing to be mentored by someone for free and then put the time in to learn how to apply it. Don't just assume you know it because you do something similar. You know, like I would never show up to a track and field course and be like, I already know this stuff. A skip, yeah, gotcha. B skip, got it. A march, like as if it's just that. You know what I'm saying? There's a different type of application of those movements that are specific for that. And that's something, and one day I will do that. One day I will go for free on my, or go and not expect to get paid and ask a track and field coach like, hey, coach, can I just audit your practices? Can I just learn from you? No matter how much time I have in this industry, if I want to learn more about that, I have to be willing to be humble. And I know it's a long-winded answer, but I've always been very good at that. And I always explain to people in the martial arts world, I have been a professional white belt my entire career. You know, I have 4 black belts. So to get a black belt and then be like, you know what, I'm going to go learn a new system, and to walk in knowing you have a black belt and something else and put a white belt on and like go through every single incremental test over and over again. That's what I'm saying. You have to be humble and start from scratch. If your progression is faster than the average person, great. And it should be. But at least you're showing that you have the humility to start as a white belt, regardless of what you know. In fact, you should be a better learner. You should learn more going through it. And now you have more questions to ask.
God,
so that's
good.
My answer.
That's good. There's a lot of good things in there to unpack, but what I do appreciate and totally resonate with is no matter, like, if you think you're that good, you should just be that much better as a learner, right?
Yeah.
Like, take it one step further. Don't just like, there's entitlement, but if you go past entitlement, it's appreciation. And I feel like we talked about, like a lot of particularly younger people come out and they're like, I think that they just have been in this trajectory of like, I've done this, I've worked hard for this, I've worked hard for this, I've got my degree, I'm ready to go. And it's almost like they're so excited in a way that they come off with arrogant and entitlement. Whereas like, if you can go one step further and be like, I appreciate this opportunity, I'm ready to learn and I'm ready to dive in. Although you may not get the instant satisfaction that they are looking for, the long-term satisfaction and long-term gratification, which you've alluded to, like having a vision. We talked about that in the first group chat podcast a lot, how that was kind of a reoccurring theme. It just kind of plays into all of the positivity that we have in our careers long-term. And that was a good answer. Like, I'm not going to add too much to that, because I think if anything, people should push the little rewind button, maybe 3-4 minutes, and just listen to the back half of Katalin's answer there, because you know, you peel back the onion just a little bit more than I did. And I really appreciate that answer, Kat. I think that it brings some really good nuggets to those listening.
Cool.
I do want to be mindful of your time, and I do have to jet to another appointment here. But Katalin, we're going to have to do this again because I enjoyed the conversation. Where can people find out more about you and POW?
Sure. It's just powgymchicago.com. powgymchicago.com. And then our Instagram handles are powgym and Chicago Parisi. So very easy to find me off Instagram. And hopefully you like what you see. You'll get a good glimpse of our adult program. And then of course our Parisi program, which is just awesome because Parisi is awesome.
Yeah. I appreciate you coming on, Kat.
You got it.